this was given to me by God as an assignment to complete. I want to share my story. My name is Melissa. So it was nerve-wracking because telling your story to complete strangers that you don't know may not hit as hard. To be open and vulnerable with people that I see multiple times a week can be kind of hard. I've been through a lot in my life, and I'm not here to glorify my past or my sin, but I'm also not in a space of sugarcoating anything. But I would not be standing here today happy, blessed, and well adjusted if it wasn't for God coming to get me. So I have taken some notes just because it is easier for me to wrap my head around. This is emotional. Anybody who's been through trauma in the past, talking about the things that they've been through causes emotional disrupt, anger, isolation. So I'm gonna open this with who I was before God. You do not have to be perfect for God to use you, or for God to change your life, or for God to bless you. And that was the biggest misconception for me. Go all the way back to childhood. That's where we're gonna start, because children are innocent, and when children grow up in homes that aren't protective of them and don't foster loving environments, it forever alters the course of your life, forever. I grew up in a very abusive home on both sides. It wasn't just one parent. It was both parents. My mom was emotionally and verbally abusive. My dad was very physically abusive. So sometimes you will have homes where you will run into one type of abuse, or you will have children who go through all three all at once. So when I was 10, they split up. And I still remember just being numb. Let's do some for context. So we're gonna start with my mom. To give you kind of like a background of what went on in the home when I say things like very abusive. So fights all the time, frequently violent fights, screaming and yelling. You know, I remember a lot of physical altercations between my mother and my father. And I remember seeing things like in my bedroom, you know, kind of like crouched beside the bed. And I remember seeing my mom go down the hallway across my bedroom door with a knife in her hand, going towards my dad, obviously trying to hurt him in some sort of way. You know, I remember things like my dad throwing my mom out the back of the door of the townhouse that we lived in. It was like this sliding glass door, and then this hill, but this concrete patio, and like he just opened the door and just tossed her out. Something specific I remember about that particular fight, and I think the reason why is because I have God now. I see his hand in it. My dad did, he's a plumbing engineer, so he had a bunch of tools and stuff around the house. And I remember there being this like giant saw. For me, or a probably 7 or 8 year old, it was ginormous, okay? And my brother and I are 6 years apart at this time. So he was like 1 or 2 at the time. And I remember seeing this giant saw out there, and I'm thinking to myself, and I'm like, that's so dangerous. And I see this piece of plywood sat up against the door, and I just had this feeling something was telling me, put this plywood over top of this saw. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll go do that, because that seems reasonable. If my brother and I are out here playing, maybe that's what it's for. So here I am, tossing this piece of plywood over top of this saw. So now it's laying like this, and the sliding glass door opens in front of it. That's where she landed when he opened the door and tossed her out on the patio. She landed on that piece of plywood. She landed on that plywood. And I can't help but to think now to this day, like, what if I wouldn't have put that piece of plywood there? So that was God. There's no way it wasn't. After the split, I'm like laughing at this sentence, I ended up with my mother. Neither one of the parents were a good person to end up with. I remember just the back and forth of a lot of this. Like, neither parent wanted us. Like, we were in parking lots, left with book bags full of stuff, and both parents took off. Like, we didn't know. You know, and I don't know how much of this my brother remembers because he was so young. So nobody wanted us. And that's hard to digest when you're little, that neither one of your parents love you. So I ended up with my mom somehow or another. I don't recall how that happened. And my brother went with my dad. So growing up with her was lonely. She was never around. She was completely absent when she was around. It was just emotional abuse, a lot of verbal, hateful things said. When I got into high school is when I started to realize that my mother didn't actually like me. And it's like, you sit here and you say those things and you're like, is that possible for a mother to not like their children? Because I have children. I have children in my home as part of a blended family that aren't mine. And I would take a bullet, hands down, for any one of those kids, whether or not they came from me. So I don't understand the concept of a parent not liking their child. And I think out of all of the wounds, and there's so many that I had to heal from, and some of them I'm still healing from, I think that one hit the hardest. Her being jealous, her being angry at the way other people loved me. I remember going through this at the time, like, is this wrong to feel this way? Like, am I supposed to feel like my mother doesn't like me and she's jealous of me? Like, is there something wrong with me? Just, it felt wrong, so I just tried not to deal with it. So it was me and my brother, Michael, and then at some point, my mom had a series of abortions, but one of them she did keep full term. And I remember being like, oh my gosh, here we go again. Like, how did you get the opportunity to damage another person? So then it was me and this baby and my other brother and my mom gone for weeks on end. And I'm in high school. Like, I had, thank goodness I had a vehicle at the time, but I'm 16, 17, 15, 16, 17, somewhere around those ages. And I'm just like, I don't know how to raise kids. I don't know what I'm doing. I have no idea what's going on. I don't know how to feed us. I don't have a job because I have to be here for that. And like, it was so much pressure on me to figure this crap out. And like that, because people got to eat. And like, wouldn't answer her phone. I would call. I would have to go to the neighbors. I would have to call my grandparents for help. It took away from me being able to be a normal teenager. It took it away from me being normal. The day I graduated high school, I left. Okay, to the point where like I didn't even pack all my stuff. I was like, I don't care. I'll take the freaking clothes on my back and live in my car. As long as I got a toothbrush and some deodorant to start, we'll figure it out. Because at this point, I'm a survivor and I'm resourceful and I can make anything out of nothing. Like, we're good. Probably also never forget certain moments. Some moments get blurred because when you go through trauma, you go through a somewhat sort of brain damage where your brain learns to rewire around things to keep you safe. This is one of those things that you just don't forget as a kid, because then it's like talking about it brings up the emotion in that moment when I went through it and I wasn't by myself. So then it's like my emotions, and now on top of that, embarrassment. Because normal kids don't go through these things, or normal teenagers don't experience these things. Going back to the apartment because I was missing a hoodie. The lock on the apartment door was already changed. I had literally been gone for maybe an hour or two. She changed the locks. I no longer existed. I was no longer welcome. To me, that was a very defining moment. And it was just like that. There was something inside of my brain that clicked in that moment that was where I said, screw it. I'm going to choose anger, and this is where we're going to roll with this. Because after everything I did for you that I didn't have to do growing up and taking care of the other children you decided to have, and sacrificing my own relationships, whether it was with a boyfriend at the time or friends, and missing out on prom to raise your kids, you locked me out. Okay, we're done. You've made the choice. Because at that point, you're still young. You want to repair that relationship. And I continued to go through those periods in my life. I am no longer in that position. Thank you, Jesus. But that was a defining moment for me where I was like, bet. It's time to go ghost. I'm pretty much done. And if we run into each other, it probably isn't going to be nice. It was like something snapped in my head. So I don't know if that event, I don't know why it impacted me that much. And I say them, people are like, oh my God, your mom just locked you out. Of course that's going to impact you. But like, when you look at the totality of the crap that I've been through, that is light work. That's like, okay, cool. Like, that shouldn't have been the moment that broke me. But that was the moment that shoved it on down the freaking road. You know, and that's what I go back to thinking, like, now, since I'm out of the situation and I've started to heal and God has broken so many of those hurtful events off of me and my identity, I can look back and see, like, that was God's hand all over that. That locked door wasn't my mother abandoning me. That locked door was God shutting that door and saying, this is not for you anymore. This has hurt you long enough. We need to go this way. And that was the moment that made me go into this life of chaos and rebellion and destruction. I'm not here to spare anybody's feelings at all. I have spent a year not stepping into this because I have been so scared of, what are people gonna think? Are people from my past gonna say, oh, she's a liar, or she made this up, or they're gonna come and start saying things about me, or I don't care. In church, in the middle of service, in the middle of worship, listening to our team sing and my husband play the saxophone, it was like God brought me to my knees. And I have the piece of paper, I have it in my notes. Thank goodness my spiritual father teaches us to take notes, because like now I can look back and be like, that's real. God, it's like a download. It's kind of hard to describe if you've never been in the presence of God, where you just like, you pause and it's like you stare off into space, but then it's like either you hear his voice or you have this overwhelming feeling like deep down in your heart to do something. Those are the ways that I have experienced God. I heard that I need you to go forward with sharing your story. The attacks are gonna come, and I don't want you to fight those battles, because I'm gonna fight them for you. So to me, that was confirmation. In no way, shape, or form am I here to spare anybody's feelings that has damaged me along the way. And if these are things that you haven't divulged to other people and you're worried that somebody's gonna find out that you did this to me, then maybe it's time for you to go find a church. So my dad, I didn't really get much visitation with him, and that's pretty much a constant throughout my entire life. There really was never a lot of presence of him around. There was the very last visitation with him. I remember being at his, I want to say it was an apartment or a high rise, doesn't matter, getting a CD player that I had asked for, and like the latest explicit CD. And I know that it was a 1-bedroom apartment. At that time, my brother was not with him. So we had, I want to say, a total of like 2 or 3 visitations, and that was pretty much it. So it was a 1-bedroom apartment, and I remember that the boys were on the couch and I was in the bedroom. at some point that changed. And I remember, and I'm not going to go into full details with this, and I don't think I'll ever go into full details with this because it's just not something I'm comfortable with. God would really have to dig deep down in me, and I would need confirmation, and I haven't gotten that yet, so we're going to skim the surface on this one. It's just all I'm comfortable with. So I remember being in the bed, and I remember that my dad was laying next to me. I'm going to read exactly what I wrote off this piece of paper. The details I'm not willing to share. That was the day that I was sexually assaulted. And I never said anything because I didn't have anyone to protect me. I was 10. When you grow up in a house full of that stuff, like, you're like, well, everybody's attacking me, nobody has my back, so you're just like, okay, whatever, we won't talk about this. So that was like the last visitation I had with my dad, and then when I go into my later years, it'll bring it full circle. Prior to that, when my parents were living together, my mother was just not a good wife. So there were several times I remember she was cheating on my dad. She would work long hours and never come home, and these things aren't conducive to a marriage. So my dad took a lot of his anger out on my mom, on me. Nobody ever put a hand on my brother. My brother was never, as far as I know from my father, was never beaten by my dad. My mom and my brother went back and forth a couple of times. They still have a dysfunctional relationship, but my dad never put his hands on my brother. That was me. So there were several times where my dad was physically abusive, to the point where I remember being at my grandparents' one day, explaining to her what I had went through, and when she took me into the bathroom to look, I had black and blue marks from my shoulder, the back of my shoulder blades all the way down to my butt. And I remember her not being willing to push that forward. Nothing was reported, and I don't know why. And at that age, I don't think I understood that that was the right thing to do. And she was the only some sort of a safe place at that point that I had. I don't have a relationship with anybody in my family. I'll just say that. I don't speak to a single one of them. And I haven't for years, and unless God comes down here and snatches me bald-headed, telling me that that's what I have to do, I'm not doing it. I have no want. I don't even know if I would be capable of being in the same room with any one of those people without being a complete wild animal. My grandmother didn't report it. It was always this toxic thing, and like, I hear people say this now, and I don't get in anybody's business, but it makes me cringe to hear this, because this is the defining moment for me with my grandparents, where I was like, you guys aren't healthy for me. My grandmother was very much those are the only parents you'll have type of person. Like, every time we went through something and I was divulging it to her, and I was like, this is how this makes me feel, she'd be like, well, Melissa, those are the only parents you'll have. Almost like I gotta put up with the crap. So I did. When I realized that that wasn't what God's plan was, or what I didn't want to do anymore, I was like, y'all gotta go too. And then this is the last thing that I'll kind of leave it at for this one. I moved out at 17. I don't even know how that's legal to sign an apartment at 17, but I did it. Thank you, Jesus, to the lady at that apartment complex that made that possible for me. And I remember for the first time in this new space, like, I felt my whole body relax. And I don't know if that's something that I had ever experienced before. It was just like this extenuated breath of air came out of me that never seemed to stop. And I felt free. Like free in a good way, but then scared because I don't function in calm. I do now, but at that point, it was chaos. It was 110% full throttle chaos. That's all I knew. So I just remember sitting down, and I'm just sitting on the couch, and I'm just like, looking around like, what do I do? Like, I don't have anybody to worry about or anything to do. I have written down that I had this false sense of safety. I did. I thought I was safe because all the threats were gone. But I wasn't safe because I wasn't living a life submitted to God, and I wasn't living by his principles. This was another defining moment for me that now when I look back, I see clearly it wasn't the right choice. But it was one of those pivotal points where could have went either way, and we went to the right and we should have been going to the left. I went towards the dark, I should have been going towards the light. It was time to live life on my terms, is what I wrote down. And it's because I remember being 10 foot tall and bulletproof. And I was like, that's it, we're done. I do what I want, when I want, where I want, how I want, and I'm only gonna do what feels good to me and what makes me happy. We did that. Not in a good way. So thank you for watching. And I will aim to do another one in the next couple of weeks.